Welcome to Nerdy Optimism
where everyone has a story,
with Dr. Q.
and Dr. J. Welcome back to Nerdy Optimism. I am Dr. J.
And I'm Dr. Q.
So another episode we have for our listeners. I'm excited. I listened to our guest. I listened to it a couple of times, and I thought it was pretty good, I must say. So, what were your thoughts after listening to today's guest?
I was super impressed and very grateful that she agreed to share her story with our audience because Stephanie is a very unique person, full of flavor, full of authenticity. And I think that she has so much to bring and so much information that she shared would be great for our audience. So I'm super excited for them to hear from her.
I agree 100%. I think this is a good listen for our audience. So before we dive into Stephanie Gorman is the guest for today. Before we dive into Stephanie, after I listen to Stephanie, and we'll do this each week. So after we listen, I'll come back and share with you something that just stood out to me, something that was intriguing, not necessarily the interview, but something that triggered something from the interview. You got me? So Handmaid's Tale. It's a show I've been watching on Hulu, right? Season 2, episode 1. That's where I'm at. I won't give too many details, but it starts off. The women are in this field, in the stadium. I can't recall. I won't say too much, like I said. But there's this song that comes on. My goodness, the song comes on. It just set the mood instantly. I'm like, I'm supposed to be crying, just sad. My wife is over there boo-hooing, and all I could think about was in that moment was why can't I be sad as well? And I got to thinking, I tell you why. When I was thinking of this song, that song just didn't bring sadness to me, right? So the song, you want to know what the song is? Let me bring it up. You ready?
Yes.
You ready? Okay. And you're probably like, what song is it? All right, I'll give you the lyrics first. And I should be crying, but I just can't let it show. I should be hoping, but I can't stop thinking. All the things we should have said that I never said. All the things we should have done that we never did. All the things we should have given, but I didn't. I started to sing that, but I didn't want to get fined, So I just read the lyrics. I know y'all didn't want me to get that, But that's that Maxwell.
Yeah.
You know what song I'm talking about? And so that Maxwell song, it's a sad song, but for me, I think about 2001. Our Vols, the UT Vols, we had just played Florida. It was a great game. We lost. But after the game, the Muro chapter, Kappa Alpha Psi, had an after party. It was outside. The party was banging. It was jumping. And all of a sudden, this DJ, I think it was DJ Big Six. I think that's who it was. He wanted to slow it down. He had a new song he wanted to play. One of my good friends, Mike Wright, was like, yeah, let's slow it down. Let's play this song. And I was like, man, I don't know. The crowd is going bananas. So they made an executive decision. They slowed it down. That song came on, and it was pure bliss. It was pandemonium. I loved it. And from then on, when I hear that song, I think of happiness. I think of greatness. And so the intriguing thought for me after listening to Stephanie is that some things in life, you think should be sad for you, but in actuality, some things can be happy. You just don't really know a person, right? And so you don't know people's story. You don't know the dichotomy of this is good, this is bad. You only know what they tell you, what they share. And I think that after listening to Stephanie's story, that kind of, impacted me in that I have some really good friends, and there are certain things that trigger them for that cause them pure happiness, and there's some things that don't. And so I think this is just one of those things that something that definitely we should think about when listening to Stephanie's piece today. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's so interesting that you bring that up. When you were saying the lyrics, and I was trying to catch, what song is this? Who's this?
Uh-huh.
The lyrics are very somber. They're very somber, but like you, I don't associate that Maxwell song with anything that's somber. I mean, in fact, I remember that party. I remember probably body rolling somewhere, so, it's not something that's somber for me. But when we think about things in perspective and other people's perspective, we all view things through a different lens. We all come from a different nest. And we have to take that into account when we think about experiences that other people share or may experience. So that's really interesting that you brought that up. So I have something interesting too, but I think it's from a nerdy perspective. So I like to talk about stats. And in Stephanie's story, she brings up ACEs. And that's adverse childhood experiences. And people don't realize that your childhood has such an impact on who you become as a person, as an adult, but not just mentally, but also physically. It affects your mental health and your physical health. So one interesting stat that I looked up after talking to Stephanie was about ACEs and how it can impact your future health. And it's just so interesting that 1.9 million cases of heart disease and 21 million cases of depression could be potentially avoided if we could prevent ACEs. And ACEs are things like experiencing violence, abuse, or neglect, even witnessing violence in your home or in your community. And if you've had a family member maybe attempt or die from suicide, you can also see things in your environment like substance abuse, individuals in your community or within your family home that have mental health problems, or instability due to parental separation of household members from being in jail or prison. So ACEs are now at the forefront of what we think about when we talk about mental health and some of those adverse health conditions that can occur just from what we experienced as a child.
That's a good nerdy stat there, Dr. Q. Appreciate that. Yes. So, well, I think it's a great time to go ahead and bring in Stephanie. You ready?
I'm ready. Let's bring her on in.
Let's bring her on in. Well, we want to welcome our listeners back. Nerdy Optimism Podcast with Dr. J and Dr. Q. Today we have a very special guest that's joining us, Stephanie Swanigan Gorman. I hope I got that right.
That's right.
Is it okay? So this is the portion of the show to where we get to discuss an actual story from one of our guests, and I also like to dive into just a little bit about the guest. The bio will be on our website. If I may add, the bio, I was reading Stephanie's bio. I was like, wow, what an amazing person, So,
Same here.
yeah, it's like, really? So the bio will be on our website. And then two, we like to talk about what was the thought process behind bringing in this guest. There's like always this conversation with myself and Dr. Q is like, okay, this will this person be okay for our audience? Are they going to push the narrative of mental health? Getting people to buy into the premise of getting support when it's needed. And so Dr. Q was like, okay, so tell me about Stephanie, because she didn't know Stephanie. And so why was one of the reasons you would want her to come on the show? So and it got me to thinking about, bear with me, got me to thinking about late 90s, early 2000s when CDs were the big thing. And I remember waiting on every Tuesday to when new music would drop. And I would shuffle myself to a radio outlet, Blockbuster Music or Cats or what have you. And you would have the opportunity to go and listen to music, and then you kind of decide if that was something that you wanted to buy. Y'all with me? Mm-hmm. Then there would be some artists to where, you know what, you would purchase the album without listening. Did y'all have those artists? Y'all with me? Yeah. And so when describing Stephanie to Mark Quinton, I was like, hey, this is a person that you don't have to listen to the album. If she writes something, you book it. I don't need my audience to fact check it. If she says it, then we're going to run with it. You don't need to take a 30-minute, 45-minute, hour tune in. We're just going to run with it.
We are fellow Vols, and I do remember seeing you around campus, but you know, I guess our paths never crossed where we could meet up and start a friendship. So I'm so glad to be able to start a conversation with you today and to talk to you and to hear about your story. I'm just so super excited about it. And our show today is surrounding childhood trauma and ACEs, which are adverse childhood experiences. And, you know, I think we should start right there and just open up the floor for you to tell your story.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited that that's the topic today. I think I talk to my therapist about that every 3 weeks. So I will start from the beginning. You know, when you're a child, you do not know that you're in a traumatic situation. And then my specific trauma was having a parent that was dealing with a substance abuse issue. And this was in the midst of the crack epidemic. So that was very commonplace. It was not uncommon to speak to someone else who was in the classroom with you, even teachers, because when you think about it in the 80s, and Shannon is familiar with Memphis, I grew up in a very close-knit community. The folks that lived in that community had lived there for decades. The teachers lived in the community. So there was no escaping seeing your fourth grade teacher at the corner store. Everyone knew each other. So it was an unspoken thing that there were numerous people in the community who were impacted by the crack epidemic, and a number of people's parents, cousins, aunts, uncles were struggling with substance abuse at that time. So for me, I didn't think I was abnormal in any way. There were several of us that were dealing with and sharing that experience. In my particular experience, my parent was a functioning addict. And I bring that up because that made things very complex for me when I started going to therapy. My mother is my best friend. I tell her everything. So we have an interesting relationship where it was not only a person in authority, but also someone that I considered a close friend. I do have siblings. My mother has two children. I am the youngest. I have a sister that is 9 years older. So obviously, her recollection of the experience is very different from mine. But speaking from my point of view, it was interesting because it kind of at the height of that addiction was the Just Say No campaign. So essentially, I was learning how to spot drug addiction in school while experiencing it at home. And then, at that point, I think for me, my quote unquote addiction became academia. So I excelled at school. It was the easiest way that I could distract myself. It was what I could focus on. It was also what I have learned in therapy was a reward system for me. It was, hey, mom, look at me. I am excelling at school. Um, and it was not until I became older and started peeling back those layers that I understand kind of calling a thing, that it was trauma, having those very vulnerable conversations with my mother, who has now been clean for 20 years. Um, I think there are so many of us who were in that situation in the 80s and the 90s. And I think that's part of the reason why I speak so openly about mental health and just speaking with someone. Not as much as, oh, you need to be on meds for XYZ, although I am an advocate for that as well if it calls for that. But um, being able to go back and relate to things that happened in your childhood and how you are bringing them into your adult life is extremely important. So for me, um, I was running away from therapy for a number of years. Um, when you are a quote unquote straight A student and you have lived your life functioning off of survival, you think, well, I can push through it. I will be fine. The light bulb moment went off for me when I got married. And I was like, whoa, I am bringing someone else into this life with me as a partner. There is a possibility of expanding our family, which means I will be responsible for another human in their development. I need to get it together. And it has been life changing for me. There was so much stuff that I thought I could figure out on my own. And I was like, well, girl, this is not your bag. And you cannot figure this out on your own. You need to talk to someone who is clinically trained, is able to get you to address a lot of the pain and be vulnerable about your story, because it's important. And so for me, the charge was not only to help myself, but also to help others, because I want everybody else to get here. It's so funny. I think about myself, and I'm a drinker. Not as much of a drinker as I used to be, but I think about in college how I was always telling people to go get shots. Be like, oh, it's time to have a good time. Let's go get a shot. that that has transitioned into, oh, you got a therapist? Let me find you a therapist. Because when you get the healing, you're like, oh my gosh, I want you to get it too. And it's a constant struggle, specifically with Black people, because you think about, specifically if you're raised in the church, you're taught to pray through it, that God is gonna get you through it, and I get that, But I tell people whenever I get challenged by folks that say, well, that's the path that I'm going to take, and I'm like, well, if you went to your physical and your doctor prescribed you high blood pressure medicine, are you not going to take the high blood pressure medicine because God's going to get you through it? Because your blood pressure is still going to be high every day.
So true.
That's a given.
Right.
You do not hesitate to get a Z-Pack when you are sick. You do not hesitate to take an aspirin when your head is hurting. Why are you hesitating to go to someone God is using a vessel to heal your mind? And the small part that I can do in talking to people one-on-one is where I wanted to start. And then from there, any and everything that God has called me to do, I am open to. And so I was really excited when you guys reached out to me to participate in this, because that's a part of it.
So awesome. In speaking about being raised in the church and thinking of that facet, one of my favorite things that my pastor says is that theology and therapy go together. So we need to really change that narrative surrounding, just praying about mental health and not seeking help. And, in seeking help, I'm really interested in how you navigated that. So I know as you said, for Black people in particular, it's so hard to find someone that you can go and talk to that you can trust and may have a shared experience, right? So how did you navigate that, finding someone to talk to?
So before I physically went to therapy, I had a colleague who was also a Black woman and functioned as a bit of a mentor, who had started therapy. And I am in her position now because she was the advocate. She was like, oh, you need to get to therapy. You need to get to therapy. And the big challenge for me was I needed somebody that looked like me, or I thought I needed someone that looked like me. I had struggled with years with vulnerability and codependency. So all of that ties into me coming up with all these reasons as to why I couldn't get my foot in the door. And so she kept pushing on me. She kept pushing on me. And then at the time I was in Nashville, and I just couldn't find a Black therapist. And that was around 2013, 2014. From there, I moved to Atlanta. I was in Atlanta for a year and really wasn't there long enough to get my footing to find someone. I didn't want to start engaging with a therapist and then moving. I was in a unique position because I worked in healthcare. I understood that if I move from state to state, that person is likely not certified. And so if I start engagement, that's just me. That's not common knowledge, obviously. So I moved back home to Memphis, and I said, there has to be a Black therapist in Memphis. Like, it's Memphis. Like, how are there no Black therapists in Memphis? And then I started asking around. And I couldn't get an immediate answer. And I was so shocked. I was like, what's going on, people? I gotta find me a Black therapist in Memphis. And you talk about being a black Vol posted on Facebook about a friend who was opening her own practice. And on the strength of, this is somebody that I know, I trust his judgment, it's time for me, I blindly scheduled an appointment with her. And I have been seeing her for almost a year now. And at that point, I said, okay, there has to be some sort of resources out there that I can point people to when they're looking for a therapist. And so when I started doing research, that's when I found out about therapy for Black girls and therapy for Black men. And then telling people, oh, you can go to Psychology Today and specifically look for race and gender if that is an obstacle for you. But that's not common knowledge. So even for me, with the knowledge that I do have around the healthcare system, it was a challenge for me to find someone. So I can imagine someone who did not have the background that I had, and the obstacles that they have to face in trying to find a therapist, on top of the fact that they're not crazy about the idea in the first place.
Hmm. Awesome. So, Stephanie, what do you tell that person that's listening today, uh, that's really battling some of those childhood traumas, and they're thinking, well, maybe I'm a little too old to even address some of those things that happened years ago. What do you tell that person today? What do you recommend?
The first thing I tell people about therapy is, my question is, do you need to talk to someone who has absolute no judgment in your life, who has no dependency on you? You literally can go in and talk to them and they will sit and listen, and they are not trying to fix your issue. They don't know your mama, your daddy, your Uncle Pookie. They don't know none of that. It is a time for you to sit with someone for an hour and just vent, to
Hmm.
take the stress off of your shoulders. Do you need that? The answer is usually yes. I do need to talk to someone who I don't have to tiptoe around to try not to hurt their feelings, that I don't have a previous history with that's going to take things I say that's personal. And that's the simple question for me. If that's a yes, okay, well, you need to talk to a therapist.
Hmm.
You don't need to talk to them, and I think a lot of people confuse it with, well, I'm going to get there and then they're going to think I'm crazy and they're going to prescribe medication for me. And I don't want to get on medication for whatever that's going on with me. And then you have to explain, well, there's a difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist and a clinical social worker. And having that knowledge of, no, if you're not at the place where you want to talk through medication, when you just want to talk to someone,
Hmm.
we'll go to someone who is just a licensed social worker and then go from there. And the other thing is talking through them about how your total health is involved. So, people say, well, I'm not motivated to work out. Well, why are you not motivated to work out? Um, or they'll say, well, I'm stressed out at work and my blood pressure is high. And then the conversation stops there. And then I'm saying, well, do you realize that all of that is tied together? Sometimes you need to talk to someone about why you're stressed out at work. Or sometimes that is tied to something that happened in your childhood. I think I have to come up with unique ways
Hmm.
um, to explain to them the benefit and the value of therapy. And it has to be specific to their situation. I am a nosy person. I am nosy as hell. I will ask you as, as many questions as I can to get in your business, so that I understand what your particular driver is. And I think with a lot of mental health advocacy, specifically in the Black community, hashtag self care. Self care is not going to get your nails done, girl. That ain't it. Um, Self care is not going to get your hair done. Self care is going to your physical every year. It's mental health has become a trend, and so you have to talk to people on a person to person basis.
Hmm.
Part of that is being vulnerable with your story. So that's something I struggled with for years of being, there was this veneer. I did not want to share those parts of me that made me feel uncomfortable or vulnerable. But
Hmm.
you will be amazed when you say, well, let me tell you my story as to why I went to therapy. Well, I had a parent who was drug addicted. I dealt with codependency issues, and codependency does not mean that I am dependent on other people. It also means that people are depending on me and I'm not setting appropriate boundaries. and you have to speak to them in whatever their language is. That conversation and me talking about boundaries may work for somebody else. Um, when I'm talking to, someone else in South Memphis, I'll be like, don't you ever feel like just cutting people off?
Exactly.
You feel like if people just like, leave me alone? I think that's important. You have to I think at the end of the day, you have to meet people where they are. And that's what's going to get them in the door. And then, trust and believe the person who has been trained in healing us and getting us there is going to take it from there. I've referred probably 5 or 6 people to my therapist since I've started going to her.
Wow.
That's awesome.
And the testimonies, every time they call me and they say, "Oh my gosh, I talked to your girl today, and she read me." And I'm like, good, you needed to be read. She read me too. So much to the point we're like, do we need a support group for when we get read by therapists? But that's important because now we have a community, and instead of sitting around and having conversations about things that add no value to our life, girl, let me tell you who I saw today, and she's gained so much weight, and her husband is cheating on her. That has no value to me. I want to talk about you getting your healing, where you start, not to say that you won't have the urge to have those types of conversations, but you're able to pause and say, well, where is that coming from? Why am I having that conversation? Why is that giving me some sort of intrinsic reward? And to see the change, particularly in Black women, when they invest, and it is an investment in some cases, in therapy, it's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it.
Amazing.
So Stephanie, reading your bio, you talk about some of those jam sessions with your mom and with your the cousin Rufus and Al Green. Do you ever think about those times, listening to the music jam out sessions, and when music come up from yesteryear, how does that make you feel?
Oh, music is such a source of happy memories for me as a child. And I think I have had this love affair with music because of that. I do not have any negative memories of music when I was growing up. So when I hear a familiar song, that immediately is a mood booster for me. I listen to music a lot because of that. It's so particular. I tell you a story particularly about Al Green. Hopefully my mom doesn't kill me because she's like you're going to listen to this. But every time a song of his comes on, I have a flashback of a time when she was singing background for him. And I remember sitting, and I was kind of afraid of him. I told her, I was like, I was afraid of him as a child. And she was like, well, why? And I was like, he was just different. And she said, yeah, he was different. And I think for her, she wanted to expose me to different kinds of people. I am so thankful that she never kept unique people away from me. My most memorable moments as a child was spending times in Midtown and Overton Park and Overton Square and seeing all the weird people, quote unquote. So for me, that becomes a place of comfort for me alongside music, is because there's so much authenticity there. There was no facade. Those are all happy memories from a child. So even in Memphis, I spent a lot of time in Midtown and Overton Park. It is a dream to be able to live in that area. Because for me, that was a happy space as a child. And I tell you, getting through therapy, I had a blocker to spending intentional time in those emotions. Because for me, if I talked about childhood, I was so focused on the trauma. which was probably 20% of my childhood.
Right.
The reward is in the 80%. And so what is so interesting for me and what I share with people is you got to talk about the ugly stuff.
Yeah.
You got to get through the ugly stuff. Are you going to cry, girl? Ugly cry. Ugly cry in therapy more than a couple of times. You know, the kind where you, all that. Yeah, that was me. And that's okay because now, while that still is a part of our conversations, I am really able to delve into the moments where I had such a wonderful and full childhood, and those are the memories that you need to cling to. Everything else is a lesson. One of the things people are afraid because they don't want to talk to go to therapy because they don't want to talk about the ugly stuff. But you got to talk about the ugly stuff to get to the happy stuff. So I hope my experience will encourage them to go to therapy and to talk it out because it's a beautiful experience. And I have memories that pop up from childhood that I know I had suppressed, happy memories that I had suppressed for years, that now bring me so much joy because I was able to navigate and sift through the dirt.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Wow.
And so, go ahead, Dr. Q.
Oh, I was just wanting to ask Stephanie about any projects that she may be working on and how our audience can learn more about her. Share some more information, projects, social media pages. Let us know where to find you.
Yeah, great. So on Twitter and Instagram, I am Def Steph, IAMDEFSTEF. Right now, I'm working on a project and it's very new and in the infancy stages and at the strong encouragement and urging of friends because of the things I post on social media, specifically around mental health advocacy and getting out of your own way. My purpose is to create more unicorns. Black people specifically are unicorns to me. We have our culture is beautiful. I can talk to someone in Detroit and immediately we can laugh about something that both of our moms said that we were kids because it's just a part of Black culture. So there's so much talent and so many gifts that we have if only we'll get out of our own way. If only we'll focus on making sure we are holistically taking care of ourselves, that our minds are taken care of. As Marshawn Lynch said, get your chickens in order. There are things that we could be doing that if we just got out of our own way, we would be unstoppable. So it's in its infancy stages right now, but the purpose is really to create more unicorns, making sure that we are mentally where we should be, physically where we should be, that we are tapping into our passions and we're not stuck. Because all we got is each other, and that's becoming more and more evident in these days and times. But we have such a rich culture and a rich entanglement with each other that the sky is the limit. And so for me, I thank my mom for raising me in an environment, and my grandmother raising me in an environment where I have that non-judgment and that nosiness and curiosity, as I like to call it, because I want to meet people where they are and bring out the joy that's there and the spark that's there, and just set them up for success because that is what has worked for me. And my hope is that it can happen for someone earlier in life. I did not want to be 39 going to therapy, but here I was. And I can imagine what that's going to do for an 18-year-old. If that's their focus earlier in life and they can get out of their own way and get the junk out of the way and really get to sharing their gift and what their gift truly is.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's
Wow.
really powerful. I'm really excited about that and creating more unicorns. I really love that. That's awesome. That's
Thank
awesome.
you. Thank
And
you.
the Fearless campaign, we definitely looking forward to collaborating with you to help you create as many unicorns as you deem possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's definitely well, we definitely just want to thank you for joining in on the Nerdy Optimism podcast. We truly believe that everyone has a story, and we thank you for sharing your story today, and hope that one of our listeners out there are able to tap into what you said and help them become even more authentic, help them with that breakthrough that they're definitely searching for.
Oh, thank you guys. This is a pleasure. I'm willing to help anybody find a therapist, and I'll even give you a shot along with it, whatever your poison is.
Awesome.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Yes.
Thank you.
Progressive flow. Show me my competitors' race and let you see they ain't nothing like mine.